The sun beat down mercilessly on Marcus Jenkins's back as he stood before the weathered farmhouse, keys clutched tightly in his hand. At 32, he never expected to return to Greenfield County, let alone as the owner of his grandfather's 200-acre farm. The lawyer's letter had arrived 3 weeks ago, stunning him. Your grandfather, Solomon Jenkins, has bequeathed to you the entirety of his property and holdings in Greenfield County. This land runs in your blood, son, his grandfather used to say. Marcus could almost hear the old man's voice carried on the warm summer breeze. Marcus wiped sweat from his brow and turned at the sound of tires on gravel. A dusty pickup truck pulled to a stop, and Sheriff Wade Palmer stepped out, adjusting his hat against the glare. Mr. Jenkins, I heard you were back in town, the sheriff said, his tone neutral but his eyes wary. Folks around here are surprised about old Solomon's decision. It's my birthright, Sheriff, Marcus replied firmly. My grandfather wanted me to have it. You've been gone 15 years, boy. Things haven't changed much in Greenfield. Some people aren't happy seeing a black man owning the best farmland in the county. Marcus set his jaw. My grandfather built this place from nothing. I intend to honor that legacy, whether folks like it or not. Sheriff Palmer nodded slowly. Just giving you fair warning. Reed Thompson's been eyeing this property for years. He's not a man used to hearing a no. As the sheriff drove away, Marcus pushed open the creaking door to his new home, the weight of his grandfather's legacy, and the resistance of Greenfield County, settling heavily on his shoulders. The morning dew still clung to the grass when Marcus spotted the black Cadillac crawling up his driveway, kicking dust into the golden sunrise. He set down his coffee on the porch railing and straightened his shoulders. The car stopped, and out stepped Reed Thompson, 60-something with silver hair and a tailored suit that screamed money and influence. You must be Solomon's grandson, Thompson called out, his voice honey-sweet but eyes cold as January frost. Reed Thompson. I own most of the farmland around these parts. Marcus descended the porch steps, deliberately not extending his hand. Marcus Jenkins. And I know exactly who you are, Mr. Thompson. Thompson smiled, revealing perfect teeth. Smart man. Then you'll know I'm not one to waste time. I'll give you $300,000 for this place. That's $50,000 above market value. He pulled out a checkbook from his breast pocket. You can walk away today, head back to Chicago or wherever you came from. This farm isn't for sale, Marcus replied, crossing his arms. Not at any price. Thompson's smile vanished. Son, you don't understand how things work here. This land deserves proper management. Your grandfather was tolerated because he knew his place. Times are changing, but not that much. I'm not my grandfather, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the rage building inside. And I'm not going anywhere. Thompson's face hardened. You'll find Greenfield County can be mighty unwelcoming to outsiders who don't respect the natural order. Just then, a truck roared up the drive, and a burly man leaned out the window. Everything okay, Mr. Thompson? Thompson waved dismissively. Fine, Dale. Mr. Jenkins here is just about to reconsider my generous offer. I'm not reconsidering anything, Marcus stated firmly. Thompson nodded as if Marcus had confirmed something. 1 week. Think it over. Things happen to farms all the time, equipment breaks, wells run dry, buildings catch fire. He turned and walked back to his Cadillac. I'd hate to see your grandfather's legacy turn to ash because you were too stubborn to see reason. As Thompson's car disappeared down the dusty road, Marcus felt a chill despite the morning heat. The threat hung in the air like storm clouds building on the horizon. 3 days after Thompson's visit, Marcus was inspecting the old well at the southern edge of the property when something caught his eye. The morning rain had washed away some soil, revealing an unusual black stone. He crouched down, picked it up, and turned it over in his palm. Heavy and slightly oily to the touch, it didn't look like any rock he'd seen before. Marcus pocketed the strange stone and continued his inspection. That evening, he called his old college roommate, Zach Bennett, now a geologist in Atlanta. "Send me photos," Zach instructed after Marcus described his find. "Could be nothing, but better safe than sorry." 2 days later, Zach called back, excitement evident in his voice. "Marcus, that's high-grade shale. Your land is sitting on what could be a significant oil deposit. Have you noticed any other indicators? Natural gas seeps? Unusual vegetation patterns?" Marcus's mind raced. "There's a section where nothing grows well. Grandfather always avoided it for crops. Classic sign. Listen, this could be worth millions, but keep it quiet until you get proper surveys done. People get crazy around potential oil money." Too late. The next morning, Marcus found his mailbox smashed and a dead raccoon hanging from his porch, a note pinned to its body, "Last warning. Sell or suffer." At the general store that afternoon, conversations halted when Marcus entered. The clerk, Wanda Perkins, slid his change across the counter, avoiding his eyes. "You should leave, Mr. Jenkins," she whispered. "Thompson knows about the mineral rights. Someone from the county office tipped him off after you asked about the property survey maps." Outside, Dale, Thompson's man, leaned against Marcus's truck. "Boss wants to meet again. Says his offer just doubled." "Tell Thompson my answer's still no," Marcus replied, trying to hide his shock. That night, Marcus awoke to headlights flooding his bedroom. 3 trucks circled the farmhouse, engines roaring, horns blaring. They drove across his newly planted field, tearing up the soil before speeding away. From his window, Marcus could see the crude message they'd left behind, carved into his land: "Get out." His hands trembled as he reached for his phone. Not from fear, but from fury, the pre-dawn light revealed the full extent of the damage. Tractor tires slashed. Irrigation pipes smashed. The newly repaired barn door hung from one hinge, splintered and marked with crude, hate-filled words sprayed in red paint. Marcus stood in the farmyard, fists clenched at his sides, as Sheriff Palmer surveyed the destruction. "You know who did this," Marcus said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Sheriff Palmer sighed. "Knowing and proving are different things, son. Thompson's boys were drinking at Lou's bar all night. Witnesses will swear to it. So that's it? They destroy my property, threaten me, and walk away?" The sheriff adjusted his hat. "I'll file a report. That's all I can do right now." As Palmer drove away, Marcus noticed a black sedan parked at the end of his driveway. A woman in a business suit stepped out, approaching with purposeful strides. "Mr. Jenkins?" "Tanya Washington, Greenfield County Assessor's Office." She handed him an official-looking document. "I'm required to inform you that your property taxes have been reassessed. Effective immediately." Marcus scanned the paper, his stomach dropping. "This is triple what my grandfather paid. That's impossible." "New valuation based on potential mineral resources," she said, not meeting his eyes. "Nothing personal." Later that afternoon, Marcus discovered his water had been shut off. At the utility office, the clerk shrugged. "Computer error. Might take 2 weeks to fix." That night, alone in the darkened farmhouse, Marcus jumped at the sound of breaking glass. A brick had shattered his kitchen window, wrapped in a note, "Fire next time." He retreated to his grandfather's study, pulling the old shotgun from the cabinet. Sitting in the darkness, Marcus realized he was at a crossroads. Run away, or stand and fight for what was rightfully his. The bell above the door at Morrison's Hardware jingled as Marcus entered, list in hand. He needed supplies to repair his vandalized property but braced himself for another rejection. Hank Morrison, a weathered man in his 60s, approached from behind the counter. "You're Solomon's boy," Hank stated matter-of-factly. Your grandfather was a good man. Saved my store during the flood of '92. Marcus nodded, surprised by the warm reception. Heard about your trouble, Hank continued, lowering his voice. Not everyone in town stands with Thompson. Some of us remember when his daddy tried the same tactics on your grandfather. Before Marcus could respond, the door opened again. Rosa Diaz, who owned the neighboring farm, walked in with her son Miguel. Mr. Jenkins, Rosa called out. We've been looking for you. My boy and his friends want to help fix your fences tomorrow. Why would you help me? Marcus asked, bewildered. Rosa's expression hardened. Thompson tried to force me out 3 years ago after my husband died. Said a Mexican woman couldn't manage a farm alone. She smiled tightly. I'm still here. That evening, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by unexpected allies. Hank, Rosa, and elderly twin sisters Esther and Pearl Jackson, who'd taught at the local school for 40 years. Thompson's been buying up the county, piece by piece, Esther explained. Anyone who resists gets pressured out. Pearl nodded. He wants your land for the oil, but he also can't stand the idea of a black man owning prime property. It's about power and prejudice. You're not alone in this fight, Hank said, spreading a map of the county on the table. And we know things Thompson doesn't think we know. 3 days later, Marcus stood tall on his front porch as Thompson's Cadillac and 2 pickup trucks rolled up his driveway. The noon sun cast harsh shadows across the scene. Thompson stepped out, flanked by Dale and 4 other men carrying baseball bats and gas cans. Last chance, Jenkins, Thompson called out, his voice echoing across the yard. Sign the papers, or we burn this place to the ground. Might look like an unfortunate accident to the insurance company. Marcus didn't flinch. You won't touch my property, Thompson. Thompson laughed. And who's going to stop us? Sheriff's conveniently out of town today. It's just us here. Not quite, came a voice from behind the barn. Hank Morrison stepped into view, shotgun in hand. Rosa Diaz appeared next, followed by Miguel and 5 other young men from neighboring farms. The Jackson sisters emerged from the side of the house, Pearl holding up her cell phone. We're live streaming this, Mr. Thompson, she announced. To the county supervisor and the state police. Governor's office too. Thompson's face contorted with rage. This isn't your fight. Get off this property. Actually, Esther Jackson said, holding up a document, we have notarized permission to be here. And we brought something else you should see. Rosa stepped forward, unfolding a large surveyor's map. This shows that you've illegally moved boundary markers on 6 properties, including mine and the Jacksons. The original survey markers are still there, buried under new soil. And, Hank added, we've got affidavits from 3 county employees about bribes you paid for tax reassessments. Thompson's men shifted uncomfortably, lowering their weapons. You're bluffing, Thompson snarled, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Marcus descended the porch steps. My grandfather taught me something important, Thompson. He said, when facing a bully, never fight alone. Thompson lunged forward suddenly, grabbing Marcus by the shirt. You uppity. Before he could finish, Marcus broke the hold with a swift movement and Thompson stumbled backward, falling hard to the ground. His men stepped forward, but froze when they saw multiple shotguns leveled at them. You're trespassing on my property, Marcus said evenly. And I have witnesses. For the first time, fear flickered in Thompson's eyes. 2 months later, Marcus stood in the county courthouse as the judge announced her verdict. Thompson, pale and diminished in his expensive suit, stared straight ahead as the gavel fell. The court finds the defendant guilty of criminal intimidation, attempted arson, property damage, and corruption of public officials, Judge Marilyn Woodson declared. Mr. Thompson, you will surrender your business licenses and pay full restitution to all affected parties. Outside, beneath the ancient oak tree, Marcus was surrounded by his allies, now friends. Rosa squeezed his hand. Hank clapped his shoulder. The Jackson sisters beamed with pride. "Your grandfather would be mighty proud," Pearl whispered. That evening, Marcus walked his land as the sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. He stopped at Solomon's grave beneath the willow tree. "We did it, Grandpa," he said softly. "This land stays in the family." A gentle breeze rustled the willow branches, and somewhere in the distance, a whippoorwill called out, the sweet sound of justice, of belonging, of home.